All right, let's get this over with. So Amazing Spider-Man number 25 dropped in comic shops today and finally answered the question of, hey, whatever happened to Mary Jane? So, spoiler alert, past this point, I am going to be spoiling this comic and what happens in it. So, if you haven't read this turd of a comic and you don't want to spoil it for you, go ahead, read the book, pause the video, get really angry at the comic, crumple it up, throw it against the wall, come back, the review will be waiting for you. Now, on with the review. So, this book takes off immediately following the events of issue number 23 of Amazing Spider-Man, not 24. So, for those of you who don't remember, in issue number 23, Peter and Mary Jane are fighting some evil Mayan god guy and his crazy mad scientist sidekick, and they get thrown into a magical bullcrap dimension where they meet a rando named Paul, and they're able to open up a dimension that can send one of them back to the real world. And so Mary Jane shoves Spider-Man through the portal, says, hey, you're the only one that can save us, so go figure out how to get us out of here. We'll be waiting for you to save us. And that's where issue 23 ends. Issue 24 is Spider-Man trying to figure out how to save Mary Jane. He steals some stuff from the Fantastic Four. Norman Osborn helps him build a doorway back to the magical bullcrap dimension. He goes through, he fights that god guy and defeats him again. Mary Jane, he finds his way back to Mary Jane, but in the time that's passed, she's hooked up with Paul the Rando, and now they've got a couple of kids together. So yeah, that's where issue 24 ended. Now we go into 25, which basically shows the events of issue 24, that time span, but from Mary Jane's point of view. So this kicks off right where issue 23 ended. Mary Jane is standing where the doorway was, and Paul says, hey, we got to get going. That crazy mad scientist guy can come back at any point. He knows we're here. We need to hide. And she smacks Paul in his stupid, stupid face and says, no, we're not going to go anywhere. Peter's coming back for me. He's going to save me. That's what he does. So, yeah, go away. And so Paul reluctantly agrees, and they decide to sit there and wait. But he was right. The evil mad scientist guy comes back, but it's bad luck for him because he comes back and finds this waiting for him. What am I even looking at? So super buff Rambo, tiny wrist Mary Jane and Paul are waiting for the evil mad scientist guy, and they easily fight him back because it's been like a month and they're totally jacked because the evil magical bullcrap dimension is apparently made out of pure protein powder. It's probably what all those plumes of smoke are in the background. Anyway, so they fight this guy off, and Paul says, hey, I was right. He came back for us. We need to get going because he can come back for us again. Now he knows where we are. And even though they easily defeated this pathetic villain, Mary Jane agrees, and so they're going to go into the countryside. And while they're wandering around, they find a cabin that's got a couple of kids living in it. And big revelation, those two kids that Peter or Paul and Mary Jane have, that's not their biological children. That's just two kids they found living in the magical bullcrap dimension that just happened to look a lot like them, that they took in and decided to kind of protect and nurture and raise. And at this point in the storyline, we go into the months turned into years section of the story, because while in issue 24, about a month passed for Peter Parker, because this is a magical bullcrap dimension and time works differently here, 4 full years passed for Mary Jane. And her, Paul, these two kids have this whole kind of life together. And it does address it for those of you who are wondering. Yeah, Mary Jane waited about 2 years before getting it on with Paul. So that's how long she gave the relationship with her and Peter. Anyway, at this point, we're just checking back with Paul and Mary Jane and kind of like little snapshots and snippets throughout their relationship. And we go back to them where we find that Paul and Mary Jane have been busy packing on more massive gains. And we learn the origin of Mary Jane's jackpot powers. And I should pause here because there's probably some of you who didn't know that Mary Jane had magical jackpot powers, but she does. You would have had to have read a separate Black Cat Mary Jane comic book, which was actually a tie-in to an X-Men crossover, to know that she had superpowers. I mean, yeah, none of this isn't poorly planned out at all, is it? Anyway, so she's got these weird magical math-based superpowers where she spins a literal slot machine that gives her a random superpower when it's done. At this point, the evil god guy attacks. She tries to use her jackpot powers, but she gets a power that doesn't really help her. But luckily for her, Peter comes swinging back into the story. He fights the evil god guy again. And this is the point of where we saw in issue 24, where he defeats the evil Mayan god and sees Mary Jane and her new family. And the doors open. The 4 of them, or the 5 5 of them go back through the portal together, and Mary Jane and Peter get to have their talk where Mary Jane basically explains how things are, says, hey, you know what, this is my husband, this is my guy now, this is my life now, I'm not leaving him, have a nice life, the end. And that's it. The Peter Parker and Mary Jane relationship that fans have been invested in, have read about, have rooted for literally decades, ends with one conversation and Mary Jane hooking up with another guy. That's the amount of disrespect this book has for their entire history together. Anyway, Peter is understandably upset, so he leaves, but waiting outside for him is a Fantastic Four, and they're out there like a couple of loan shark debt collectors because he stole some stuff from them, and that doesn't make them happy. And at this point, you would think the Peter Parker that we know, the character that we've been invested in all these years, would probably, get a solemn look on his face and explain to the Fantastic Four, I was in a desperate position. My wife was in trouble. She was trapped. She needed me to save her. I saw no other way but to do what I did. I'm really sorry. And then the Fantastic Four would look at their friend, their colleague, their one-time teammate, and say, you know what? This is the life we all live. We understand, but you should have trusted us. And they put this whole ugly event behind them. But no, Peter Parker decides to be a child and punch the Fantastic Four. And a whole brawl breaks out where he and the Fantastic Four are having a fight with each other. And they just keep fighting until Captain America shows up and separates all of them and basically says, no, Peter's not worth our time. He's a scumbag now. We're just going to leave and not talk to him anymore. And they do. And Peter's entire relationship with the entire superhero community is just burned. It's gone. It's done. They hate him now. And then the rest of the book is just a montage of Peter being a dick to everyone in his life. He walks out on his roommate, takes a swing at him on his way out the door, tells off Aunt May. It's just awful. And that's it. That's how the book ends. That's the putrid plot of Amazing Spider-Man number 25. So there's one more chapter in this dumb story, which is supposed to be the most shocking of all of them. Whatever at this point. I mean, the only thing I can say that describes this book fairly, I think, is just character assassination. That's what this book is. It's what this entire storyline has been. In their event to, for whatever reason, undo Peter and Mary Jane, they've absolutely bulldozed their characters. So let's get into it. Let's start with the Peter and Mary Jane relationship. These two have been through thick and thin together. They've been through all this crap, and all it took was just some random guy and Mary Jane getting stranded with him for a while to end that whole thing in just the stupidest and most contrived of ways. And this really points to, first, let's talk about Mary Jane's character, because Mary Jane, she's had a very strong character trait her entire time in comics, and that's loyalty. She's loyal to whoever she's with, whoever her friends are. She sticks by them through thick and thin. So you would think that the character that fans have read, have invested themselves in, who've come to know and love over all these years, would be in this situation, and regardless how long Peter took to get back to her, she would have that faith that he's coming back to rescue her, and that she needs to just believe that and stay faithful and true to him and what he's going to do for her, because that's been her character this entire time. That's one of the endearing qualities about her, and that's completely absent in this storyline. She loses the faith after a couple of months. She hooks up with this guy after a while, and when Peter does come back, she has no remorse about saying, hey, yeah, you know what, peace out, Peter, I've got a new guy now, I've moved on, you should do the same. And it's disrespectful to her. It's disrespectful for Peter. It's disrespectful for the fans of the comic. And, all I can say is don't worry about it, Peter, because you got greener pastures right in front of you. Believe me. Now let's move on to Spider-Man himself. So Spider-Man, again, he's got main character traits, and one of his main character traits is altruism. Spider-Man knows the greater good. Everything he does is about the greater good. With great power comes great responsibility. That's what that is. No matter what the sacrifice, you sacrifice for the greater good. That means that if he needs to do something that goes above and beyond to save Mary Jane, then when the Fantastic Four come calling, he's going to face the consequences for what he did. He's not going to throw down and try to beat up the Fantastic Four. And as far as this whole Mary Jane and Paul dynamic goes, they could have done the story and kept everybody to their core character values. You could have had Mary Jane stranded with Paul this entire time, but stay true to Peter. Even though she's falling in love with Paul slowly, her sense of loyalty would have taken priority, and she would have kept that at bay, at least until she sees Peter again. And then when Spider-Man rescues her, he could see what they formed, that this bond that's been created, this family's been created, and realize that that's something that he can never give Mary Jane, and then just let her go and say, you know what, you're needed here, and the two of them can part ways amicably. That at least would have been a way to do what they're trying to do, but in keeping with the character of everybody. And I think you'd probably still have a lot of upset fans, but probably a lot less upset, because at least the characters would have acted like the characters we've known all these years. Ultimately, this comic book is just rancid. Everything about it is terrible. Every chapter of this storyline, 23, 24, and now this, it makes me physically uncomfortable as I'm reading them. Like I squirm in my chair. It's just cringy. It's bad. I don't like seeing these characters reflected this way. I don't like seeing this kind of abuse happening to characters that I've loved for so long. But yeah, that's really all I have to say about this book. I can't think of another insult that's strong enough to warrant how bad I think this book is. So let me know if you guys have read it. Let's talk about it in the comments below. What did you think of the whole story of Mary Jane and Paul? Is it good? Is it bad? Are you rooting for him? Are you like me and you're a Peter and Black Cat fan anyway? So I'm not probably at the level of some of you, but I know a lot of people are upset. Let's talk about all that in the comments below. While you're down there, do all the usual YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe to the channel. If you're not already a subscriber, I'd love to have you. Thank you so much for sticking to the end of the video. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Talk to you then. Bye.